I recently put out a video on Mad Mike Calvert and his exploits with the Chindits in Burma, as well as the SAS. Today I shall be continuing on the theme of the Chindits, but talking about a man who served under Calvert and whose incredible story and heroism saw him awarded Britain's highest award for valour, the Victoria Cross. His name was George Albert Cairns. Cairns was born in December 1913 in the south of England. After completing his schooling, he went on to work as a banker in Kent, where he met his wife, who he married in 1941. In July of that year, he commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Somerset Light Infantry. Cairns, along with his unit, was sent to India, and it was here, in India, that he volunteered for service in Ord Wingate's famed Chindits. The Chindits were the largest Allied Special Forces unit of the Second World War. They fought deep behind the Japanese lines in columns, and their aims were to cause the maximum amount of damage and chaos possible before slipping back to their own lines. The Chindits have gained a reputation as some of the toughest soldiers Britain has produced for their ability to live and fight in some of the worst conditions possible against a frantic and brutal enemy. Cairns was part of Mike Calvert's 77th Brigade, the main force that took part in Operation Thursday, the second larger Chindit operation. The operation would see over 20,000 men penetrate deep behind the Japanese lines via glider and air landings. The rough plan was to establish bases behind the lines from which the Chindit columns could strike at the Japanese at shorter distances. Cairns landed in Burma with the 77th Brigade, and their objective was to block a Japanese supply route from the Chindit base, which they nicknamed White City. Here, they set up a defensive box and dug in. Near to White City was a hill that dominated the surrounding area, called Padoga Hill. Padoga Hill, as it was known, was occupied by the Japanese, who had launched attacks from it the previous day. Mike Calvert, the unit's commander, ordered the hill to be taken on the morning of the 19th of March 1944, and he personally would lead the attack. George Cairns was one of the men who took part in the attack on the hill. After hard fighting, the 77th reached the top. Once there, a horrific battle took place in an area no larger than 2 tennis courts. Men fired at each other from point-blank range. Bayonets, fists, kicks were thrown at each other. Grenades went off all around, thrown by both sides. Cairns was one of the men taking part in the heavy fighting. During the attack, he was engaged by a Japanese officer who carried a sword. After a brief fight, the Japanese sword hacked off Lieutenant Cairns' left arm, leaving it hanging on by a thread. Undeterred, however, Cairns proceeded to shoot the man before picking up the sword and carrying on the battle. Cairns rallied the men around him and charged at the Japanese, swinging the sword wildly at any enemy soldier who came within range, and he succeeded in killing and wounding several of them who dared to. His actions in the battle inspired those around him, and the British successfully drove the Japanese off Padoga Hill. Mike Calvert, the unit's commander, spoke to Cairns after the battle, and Cairns said, "Have we won, sir? Did we do our stuff? Don't you worry about me." Sadly, however, George Cairns passed away shortly after, succumbing to the wounds he received in battle. He was recommended for the Victoria Cross. However, his recommendation was never approved, as the Chindit commander, Ord Wingate, had it in his possession when his plane went down on the 24th of March 1944, meaning it was lost, destroyed in the crash. When the proposal was resubmitted, it was delayed further, as 2 of the 3 men who had made the recommendation had sadly also been killed in action. Thankfully, Mike Calvert, who had been at Padoga Hill and commanded the 77th Brigade, had the case reopened, along with Cairns' widow, who wrote to her local MP after hearing about Cairns' exploits on the BBC radio broadcast. The MP in turn went to the War Office, and finally George Cairns was awarded a posthumous Victoria Cross, Britain's highest award for valour in face of the enemy. He is buried in Burma at the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery at Tagan, an hour north of Rangoon. His wife continued to work at the bank they met at, and she never remarried. Cairns' Victoria Cross is on display at the Museum of the Staffordshire Regiment in the town of Whittington. I think the best way to end this video is by the words used to describe George Cairns by his Batman, Private Coles, who wrote a letter to Cairns' wife, simply stating that he was a hero. That concludes today's video. Thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed, don't forget to hit like and subscribe, and drop me a comment as well. See you all on the next one. Goodbye.